there. Starting something newer every day at about this time, which is about 10:30 my time on the East Coast. I am gonna pop in and give some online study from home skill habit ideas and also talk about something current with science related to COVID. So, since it is Monday, skill habit idea for Monday. Monday should be your figure out what you got to do day. So, my official skill habit for Monday is look through each of the things you have to do. If you're a student, obviously it's each of your classes or each of your things that would have due dates, and make a list of all the items that are due by the end of the week, and maybe include by Monday so that you have a whole week in front of you. I like to do that in a Word document or a Google Doc, because the next thing that you should do is for each of those items that are due by the end of the week, underneath them, list the actual actions that you need to take for the items. So if what you need to do is read, then you have to list how many pages you have to read. If what you have to do is take an assessment, you need to list that you have to take an assessment. If you need to study before you take your assessment, then you need to list 30 minutes of studying, maybe times 3 before you take your assessment. Or write a paper would be write a paper. Then put them in priority order. So figure out what's due first and number it, and then leave that list where it is and make yourself a to-do list from the action items. So the things that are due first go first in your to-do list. And so you take one of the actions and you put it in there, and you put it for a defined period of time. So this is where we don't do the entire thing, but you do it for a defined period of time. So if you have reading due by Wednesday, the first thing in your action list would then be read for 30 minutes. If you have a paper due, Tuesday or Thursday or something, you might have it in there as work on paper for 30 minutes. You make a list of those actions in numbered order, and then you work on them. And I don't advise working on any single action for more than 25 to 30 minutes before switching to another one, unless you're real good, in which case put them in for an hour. But really, I think 45 minutes should be the max on any one item. So that is your study skill tip for today. Take your actions, make a list, put them in priority order, start working through them. Don't worry that much about it. If you have that list to the side, then as you run out of action items, you grab them from over there and you keep adding them to it. All right. And our timely science lesson for today, I was on Facebook and I found myself a news article from the New York Daily News, who I mostly don't like to begin with because they are good with the headlines and not so good with the articles. Sometimes they have some kind of funky stuff. But if you find it, and I will find it and make sure I link in the notes when I'm done with this, where the article is, it essentially said that the coronavirus can travel through air up to 13 feet. I think that's what it was. And that's what the article said. And so within the article, it also talked about, I'm going to see if I can find it so I can remember this precisely, how this was published in a paper, which they did not cite, and how it was real important and how we all need to worry about it. So that always bothers me when they're telling me that kind of stuff and I can't actually read the data. So let me tell you about the data that this article is based on so you can see it. So I went and hunted down the paper from the, let's see, what journal is it from? The Emerging Infectious Diseases journal, which is part of the CDC publishing. And obviously these are published early. They're not final versions. They can't be completely peer reviewed, but they're pretty good and you get to see the data. So here's how this article worked. First of all, it looked only at coronavirus transmission in hospitals, specifically in Wuhan. And it was looking at two things. One was an intensive care unit, and one was a general COVID ward. So this was a hospital treating COVID-19 patients. In the study, they then swabbed areas, specifically areas that weren't necessarily touched by people. So air vents, floors, contaminated objects, things like that. So what does it say? They sampled floors, computer mice, trash cans, sickbed handrails, patient masks, protective equipment, and air outlets. And then they looked for the virus SARS-CoV-2 by real-time PCR. So this has a couple of major limitations. One, it is only in a hospital where we expect things to travel. And two, they're only looking for viral RNA, which means there are some viral particles or some virus RNA in that area. None of that tells us how much is there, and it does not tell us how infectious things are. So that's super important. All right. They found viral RNA almost everywhere, as you might imagine. However, they did find it mostly inside of the appropriate areas. There were some places where they found it tracked. They found it on floors in places like the pharmacy where there were no patients. So some virus got tracked to the floors. Whether or not there would be enough for somebody to pick up and then get into their system seems pretty limited. They found most of it on floors, in fact. And since this has to get into your respiratory system, floor virus is far less likely to be problematic than anything else. They did find it in air vents and in some cases in places that were downstream of the direction the air flew, but not very much. In each case, they tested a number of different places, and they only found positive results in some of each. It was very few in which they found complete rates of percentages. Mostly it ranged from about 40 to like 60% of the places that were touched. In the ICU, which is where the sickest patients are and where the most medical work is being done on the respiratory system, so including intubations and things like that, there was a lot of travel. The stuff was found up to, and this was the furthest possible place, up to 2 meters or 13 feet away, which is further than they're suggesting that we are by twice as much. So 13 feet is more like 3+ meters or 3+ yards. But again, it doesn't talk about the actual doses. In the general wards, actually, they found it not as far away. And as soon as you left the room, it's really interesting. They have a room layout that sort of shows it. The percentages drop dramatically. And they actually note in the paper, too, that most of their healthcare workers in this area did not get sick, so they did a good job of stopping it from getting to them. So the protective measures were not too bad, but they were definitely harsher in the ICU. So if you see an article that says that the coronavirus can travel 13 feet, it is not talking about you being in a grocery store. It is talking about healthcare workers being in the ICU, and it doesn't talk about infectious dose in any way, shape, or form. So this is not something to panic or worry about. You're probably doing just fine with where you are. So just letting you know that. Okay. I'm going to make these short on the days that I do them. So that is all you get for today. One study skill, one COVID article. I'll be back tomorrow.